Do you want to be a heroic history explorer? Let me lead you on an adventure through the past.
You need to fill in your name before you can travel back in time.
Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of Lilbumblebear's Let's Play. I'm Kristen, and we are continuing the DK, Dorling, and Kindersley game series with Become a History Explorer. This is a newer version of, I believe it was called My First Amazing History Explorer, but they remade it just so it could probably work better on newer systems. The original was from, I believe, 1998, which I also have that copy, but this is the newer edition, so I want to show you this one. So yes, this is Become a History Explorer. I hope you guys enjoy. I love history personally. It was my favorite subject in school, so I'm very excited to be sharing this game with you. Give it a thumbs up. Leave a comment down below if maybe you remember the History Explorer game, and of course subscribe for more nostalgic gaming. Check out the playlist in the description box for all of the other DK games on this channel. I have a Twitter and Instagram you can follow, a streaming channel, and a Discord server with the kindest community on the internet. Feel free to join in and say hi. It's a wonderful group of people. All right, let's go back in time. Enjoy.
Here is the latest update on the mysterious disappearance of the world-famous time traveler, Professor Timestein. The case of the missing professor has baffled authorities, but we do have a tip that he's been trapped in the past by a mysterious character who calls himself the Time Fugitive. A reward is being offered to anyone adventurous enough to rescue the professor. Stay tuned for further details.
Greetings, friends, Romans, countrymen. Hey, so you found the professor's attic. I've just zipped back from the Roman Empire. Like my legionary look? I am the Time Fugitive. And it was me that trapped the professor in the past. I did it because it's time that history got the attention that it deserves. How else could I get you to check out the past? So, here's the deal. First, you'll have to sniff out the missing pieces of the time trail. These could be anywhere in history. Complete the time trail and, hey, presto, you can find the professor. That's all there is to it. See you around. I'm History.
Can you help the professor? Click on the notice board to find out more about your mission, or click on the movie projector for a guided tour of the attic. You have discovered Professor Timestein's secret attic room, where there is lots to explore. To move around the room, just click on the sides of the walls. Click on the time detector poster to play a fast and fun historical identification game, or click on the professor's index if you need to find a subject quickly. You'll also find his options trunk contains all kinds of helpful information about this disc. In this part of the professor's room, you can look at the historical souvenirs you have collected in your own personal time travel journal. If you want to quit, click the quit sign on the attic door. To test your historical knowledge, try answering the tricky questions in the Ancient Treasure Challenge. Or recreate scenes from the past using the History Maker. Your mission folder contains the time trail you need to complete in order to find the professor. And last but not least, use the professor's time machine to travel back to past worlds. Wherever you see a movie projector, you can click on it if you need more help. Time Travel Journal.
About me. More about me. About my family. My journey to ancient Egypt. The River Nile. Temples and tombs.
Your mission. Professor Timestein has been trapped in the past by the troublesome time fugitive. To rescue him, you need to explore each historical world and find all the pieces of the time trail. Watch the movie below to find out what you need to do. To rescue the professor, you must complete the time trail, which is in your mission folder. To find the missing pieces, use the time machine to travel back to a historical world. Then explore the world by clicking on things that interest you. When you see a piece of the time trail on an information screen, click on it to collect it. When you have found all 8 pieces, one from each of the 8 worlds, the time trail will reveal the professor's location and you will become a history explorer.
You've arrived in ancient Egypt, 1200 BC. You could probably tell where you were by the pyramids. Hey, you're no mummy. I'm off to sail down the River Nile. Coming along?
Favorite pets. Most people in ancient Egypt kept pets such as cats and dogs. The Egyptians believed that cats were sacred animals. Often when a cat died, its owner would have it made into a mummy and bury it in a special cemetery.
Off to a great start. Only 7 more pieces to go.
Favorite pets.
In ancient Egypt, cats were considered
Harvesting papyrus. Reeds called papyrus thrived along the banks of the River Nile. The Egyptians used papyrus for all sorts of things. They made sandals, boats, and rope from reeds. They also discovered that they could use the reeds to make a kind of paper. We call this paper papyrus.
Animals of the Nile. Many kinds of animals lived in and around the River Nile. Fish, hippos and crocodiles swam in the river, and many types of wild birds nested along its banks. The Egyptians enjoyed hunting hippos, but this was a very dangerous sport.
Which of these animals did the ancient Egyptians hunt? Hippo.
Nile boat. Sailing down the River Nile was much easier than travelling across the desert. Because of this, the Egyptians did not need many roads.
Ancient Egyptian boats were made of
The River Nile. Everyone in ancient Egypt lived near the River Nile. In this dry desert country, People thought of the river as a magical, life-giving force.
Most people in ancient Egypt lived near.
My journey to ancient Egypt. The river, temples and tombs. The River Nile. Trading for goods. The ancient Egyptians did not use money. Most people simply traded for things they needed, such as food and clothes. For example, a farmer might swap some of his crops for a new kilt. Harvesting papyrus. Gods and goddesses. There were dozens of gods and goddesses worshipped in ancient Egypt. Each god looked after one part of life, such as death or the harvest. Many gods had the body of a human and the head of an animal. The most important god was Re, the sun god.
Egyptian children. In their free time, Egyptian boys and girls enjoyed all sorts of games. They had toys, played ball games, and had piggyback fights and races. When they were not playing, boys learned their father's job. Girls usually helped their mothers at home. Egyptian fashion. Egyptians loved fashion and always made sure they were clean and well dressed. Both men and women wore wigs, eye makeup, perfume.
In ancient Egypt, who wore makeup and jewellery? Both men and women.
Egyptian women. Egyptian women had more freedom than women in other ancient civilizations. They could own land and run farms and businesses. A few women became doctors or priestesses, and two of ancient Egypt's most famous rulers were women. Egyptian temple. Deep inside an Egyptian temple was a sacred shrine dedicated to a god or goddess. Only priests and priestesses were allowed to see this shrine. They had to shave their heads and wash to purify themselves before entering the temple.
Who was allowed into an Egyptian temple?
Magic charm. The Egyptians believed in magic. Most people wore lucky charms to protect them from danger. They asked doctors and priests for magic spells for all sorts of things, from curing diseases to becoming successful.
In ancient Egypt, people wore magic charms.
Farming. It was hard work ploughing and harvesting in the hot sun. Farmers worked in their fields almost all year round. They grew wheat to make bread and barley to make beer. They also grew many vegetables, such as peas, beans, onions, lettuces and cucumbers.
Watering the crops. To keep their crops healthy in the hot sun, the Egyptians relied on water from the Nile. Farmers used a device called a shadoof to take water from the river. They dug ditches from the river to the fields so the water could flow to the plants. Entertaining the pharaoh. The pharaoh lived in luxury. He had a grand palace where he held splendid banquets. The pharaoh sat on his royal throne while dancers, musicians, acrobats and magicians entertained him and his guests.
The pharaoh. The pharaoh was the king, the most powerful person in Egypt. He owned all the land and everything produced in the country. The people believed he was a god on earth. They thought he could bring the blessings of the gods to Egypt.
Making a mummy. Turning a dead body into a mummy is called embalming. To embalm a body, food. Egyptians ate meat, fish, bread, vegetables, fruit, and cakes sweetened with dates and honey. Egyptian bread was made from wheat. It was so gritty it could wear away people's teeth. Most people drank beer made from barley. Children drank wheat beer.
Hieroglyphs. The Egyptians developed a type of picture writing called hieroglyphics. Each hieroglyph was a tiny picture that represented a word or sound. For example, the symbol for the word owl was an owl.
Ancient Egypt, 3100 to 30 BC. Early Egypt. Egypt is a very ancient country. A great civilization. For the next 3,000 years, the Egyptian Empire in 1400 BC.
Mummy. The
ancient Egyptians made mummies.
Treasures of the tomb. In ancient Egypt, the dead were buried in tombs with treasures and magic charms to help.
Learning to write. Not many people in ancient Egypt could read or write. Trained writers were called scribes, and it took many years for them to learn the complicated hieroglyphic writing. Scribes wrote down all the laws and events in the kingdom.
Pyramids. A pyramid is a huge tomb built for a pharaoh. The pharaoh believed that the pyramid would protect his treasures and his body from robbers and help his spirit reach heaven. Each of these amazing tombs took thousands of people many years to build.
Pyramids were built as palaces for
Sphinx. The Egyptians built statues of sphinxes to guard their holy places. A sphinx
statues of sphinxes were
My journey. Daily. My journey to
Egyptian house. All Egyptian houses were built from mud bricks. They had small windows to keep the sun out and flat roofs, where people often ate and slept. The cooking was usually done in the open air. This helped to avoid fires that could burn down the house and also kept smells away.
Egyptian soldiers. The Egyptian army protected the country from invaders. Some soldiers rode in fast war chariots, but most fought on foot. Egyptian soldiers were armed with curved swords, axes, spears and bows. Their weapons were made from bronze and wood.
Time trail. Collect the
Take a journey to ancient Greece to find this piece of time trail. So here we are in ancient Greece, 400 BC. You've achieved an Olympic feat getting here so fast. But can you beat this?
Dressing up. Greek clothes were made from thin woolen cloth. Sometimes the cloth was dyed a bright colour or was patterned. Both men and women wore a loose tunic called a chiton. People washed every day and combed and oiled their hair.
Greek warship. When they fought their enemies at sea, the Greeks sailed mighty warships called triremes. In battle, they would row as fast as they could straight at the enemy and ram them with a large metal battering ram at the front of the ship. Sparta. Sparta was a powerful city-state that fought many wars against Athens. The Spartans were a tough and warlike people. Their soldiers were greatly feared and thought to be unbeatable. Spartan boys trained as warriors from an early age, and girls had to be fit and strong as well. Philosopher. Ancient Greece had many great thinkers called philosophers, or lovers of wisdom. Greek philosophers tried to find out how the world worked. The ideas they came up with still influence the way we think today, over 2,000 years later.
A famous Greek philosopher was... A famous Greek...
Coins. The Greeks were some of the first people in the world to use money. They made coins from silver or gold. Each city made its own coins, stamped with a special symbol. Coins in Athens were stamped with an owl, the symbol of the goddess Athena. Heroes and monsters. The Greeks loved stories about heroes battling against monsters. The most famous Greek hero was Heracles, or Hercules. In one story, he fights and kills the Hydra.
An ancient Greek hero...
Theatre. The ancient Greeks performed plays as part of their religious festivals. They were the first people to perform plays as entertainment. The plays took place outdoors in large round theatres. Actors wore masks and colourful robes.
In ancient Greece, actors wore makeup, masks. In ancient Greece...
Mourning the dead. In ancient Greece, life could be very short. Many men were killed in wars, and women often died giving birth. The Greeks believed in life after death, but they still mourned their dead. At funerals they wore black robes, cut off their hair, and wailed and cried. The Olympic Games. The ancient Greeks took sport very seriously. They held athletic contests to honour their gods. The Olympic Games, held every 4 years, were the most important. Athletes from all over Greece came to compete in the Olympic Games.
In ancient Greece...
The Olympic Games.
Greek Olympic events. Select your favorite sports event from the ancient Greek Olympics by dragging it into the box. But be careful, only 5 of the sports shown below were events in the Greek Olympics. Discus, discus. Chariot racing. Wrestling. Discus.
Life in Greece. Market. Every town in ancient Greece had a busy market called the Agora, where people did their shopping. They bought food from farmers and fishermen, and cloth or pots from craftsmen. The Agora was a good place to meet with friends. Ancient Greece. The dawn of Greece. Some 3,000 years ago. Wars for power. All free Greek men were trained to fight. Ancient Greece in 400 BC.
Athens. Athens was the largest and most powerful city-state in Greece. It was a magnificent city, full of beautiful buildings. The most important part of Athens was called the Acropolis. This was a sacred hill with many temples dedicated to Athena, the patron goddess of Athens. The Assembly. The free men of Athens regularly gathered together to discuss laws, elect leaders, and judge.
The laws of Athens were made by the emperor, all free men.
Slaves. In ancient Greece, slaves did much of the hard work. Household slaves made food and looked after the children. Other slaves worked in mines or toiled on farms. Most slaves were born into slavery or were captured in battles. Food. Most Greeks ate simple, healthy foods. They made bread from wheat and ate it with goat's cheese and olives. Seafood such as fish and squid was also popular. Everyone drank wine mixed with water to make it less strong.
The Oracle at Delphi. An oracle was a holy place that people visited when they wanted the gods to answer a difficult question. The city of Delphi was home to the most famous oracle in ancient Greece. People believed that the god Apollo could speak to them through the priestesses at Delphi. Children. Greek children enjoyed toys such as miniature ox carts and chariots, dolls and spinning tops. Some boys went to school, where they learned reading, writing, music and sport. Girls never went to school, but some were taught at home by their family.
Games and pastimes. When they were not working, Greeks had many ways to enjoy themselves.
Ancient Greeks enjoyed
Greek house. Most Greek houses were simple buildings made from mud bricks. Small windows were set high in the walls. In the centre of the house was a light and airy courtyard. There was an altar in the courtyard where the family could gather each day to pray.
Family life. In a Greek family, the father made all the decisions. He could even decide whether to keep or abandon a newborn baby. Mothers and daughters took care of the house, spun wool and made clothes. These were considered very noble jobs.
Greek temple. To honour their gods, the Greeks built beautiful temples. People only went inside a temple to pray when they wanted to ask the gods for a special favour. Before going inside, they would first leave an offering outside the temple.
In ancient Greece, people left offerings to the gods. In ancient
Gods and goddesses. The Greeks believed their gods and goddesses were like normal human beings, but with magical powers. Each god was responsible for a different part of life. For example, there was a goddess of love and a god of medicine.
The ancient Greek goddess of war and wisdom was
Gods and goddesses.
Mount Olympus. In Greek myth, Mount Olympus was the home of the gods. The ancient Greeks believed that the many thunderstorms over the mountain were the sign of Zeus, lord of the sky and king of the gods.
Mount Olympus was thought to be the
Mount Olympus.
Bingo! Just 6 more pieces to go.
Greek soldiers. All 3 Greek men were trained for battle. The best armed soldiers, called hoplites,
The most heavily armed soldiers in Greece were called
gods and legends. My journey to gods and legends. Life in Greece. Entertainment. My journey.
Holy Roman Empire! You're in ancient Rome, 100 AD. Hey, you made pretty good time. You must have taken the Roman road. Oops, gotta run. I'm late for a barbarian uprising.
Roman temple. Every Roman town had many temples, each dedicated to a god or goddess. A temple was seen as a god's home on earth, and a statue of the god stood inside. The Romans were afraid of making the gods angry. They tried hard to keep them happy with offerings.
Roman road. A secret to the success of the Roman Empire was its excellent roads.
Roman roads were used by Roman roads were used
The emperor. The ruler of the Roman world was the emperor. Many emperors, such as Trajan, were great leaders. Under his command, the empire reached its largest size. However, some of the emperors were not good men, and a few were driven mad with power.
Gladiators. Some slaves and criminals were trained as gladiators.
Who would have been likely to be a gladiator?
Warship. To deal with pirates, the Romans used huge warships that could ram into enemy ships and sink them. On board a Roman ship were soldiers to fight the enemy and slaves to row the ship. The biggest ships had 300 slaves on board to pull the oars. Animals for the arena. The Romans liked to watch gladiators fight and kill wild animals. They rounded up thousands of lions from Africa for shows in arenas. Tigers and elephants were shipped in from India. They also killed bears and wolves in these gruesome shows. Curing the sick. The Romans learned about medicine from the Greeks. They understood the importance of a good diet and exercise and could set broken bones. Patients paid to see the doctor, but there were temples where people could be treated for free. Feasting. Wealthy Romans often held lavish dinner parties. They feasted on their favourite.
An ancient Roman's favourite food might be...
Market. On market day, farmers and craftsmen set up their stalls in the town square or forum. They sold food and goods such as pots. There were also shops where merchants sold luxuries such as silk and ivory. To get a good deal, you had to bargain.
Syria. Syria was one of the Roman Empire's richest territories. Judea. Judea was the Roman name for what are now the countries.
Egypt. Egypt was one of the...
Africa. The Romans conquered lands along the Mediterranean. Syria. Syria was one of the Roman... Trading ship. Roman merchants sailed in trading ships to ports near and far. Some even sailed east as far as India. Merchants imported expensive silks, jewels, perfumes and spices from China and India. This trade made the eastern part of the empire very rich. Chariot racing. The Romans loved going to racetracks to watch chariot races.
What sport took place at a Roman...
Roman children. Roman boys went to school until the age of about 14. Girls stayed at home and helped their mothers. All children wore a charm called a bulla to ward off evil spirits. They took this charm off when they grew up.
Writing. Although many different languages were spoken in the Roman Empire, the official language was Latin. The Romans brought writing to Northern Europe. The alphabet we use today is based on Latin letters.
Latin nicknames. In ancient Rome, a person's nickname described Capito, Aretus, Silentius, Major, Torquatus, Pulcher, Caesar, Aretus, Naso, Aretus, Capito.
Farming. Farming produced all that was needed to feed the huge number of people in the empire. Wealthy Romans owned large farms worked by slaves. Poorer farmers had to do the work themselves. The Romans grew wheat, barley, olives, grapes, and many types of vegetables. Barbarians. The Romans called everyone who lived outside their empire barbarians. There were many fierce barbarian tribes in northern Europe and Central Asia. The Romans fought battles with tribes such as the Huns and the Goths, who invaded the empire.
Roman senators. Senators were the most powerful people in Rome, apart from the emperor. In the time before the emperors, the senators ruled Rome. Senators were chosen from the most important families in Rome. Only free men could be senators.
Town life. Life in a Roman town could be uncomfortable. Most Romans lived in crowded flats without running water.
Most people in Rome lived in...
Town life.
Another brilliant find! Just 5 pieces left.
Honouring the dead. The Romans placed a gravestone on a person's grave as a memorial. They believed that when someone died, their spirit was taken in a boat to the underworld. People were buried with a coin in their mouth to pay the boatman.
Rome. The city of Rome was the capital of the Roman Empire. It was where the emperor lived and the government was based. This beautiful city was full of markets, temples and palaces. Nearly 1 million people lived in Rome.
Hey!
Ow!
Slaves. Almost all of the hard work in the Roman Empire was done by slaves. Most slaves were prisoners captured in battle and then sold to the highest bidder. The children of slaves became slaves too. Some slaves were treated well, but most had miserable lives.
Romans at war. Roman soldiers fought many wars.
The Romans used weapons such...
Roman Empire. The first king of Rome. Legend tells Rome becomes an empire. The senators began the Roman Empire in AD 117.
Legionaries. Roman soldiers were called legionaries.
Roman soldiers were called...
Roman fort. When they were at war, Roman soldiers made a fort every night. They dug a ditch and built a...
When they were at war, Roman soldiers built forts...
Arena. An arena was a big stadium where gladiators battled to the death. Most large Roman towns had an arena. Wealthy Romans paid for the gladiator shows, so it was free for everyone else to get in. The biggest arenas could hold more than 40,000 people. An arena...
Who fought in the arenas of the Roman Empire?
Going to school. For Roman children, school was not much fun. Lessons on reading, writing and mathematics started at dawn. Teachers were often very strict and punished any mistakes. Thankfully, lessons were over by lunchtime. Only children from families who could pay went to school.
Wealthy home. Some Romans lived in grand homes called villas. A villa had a bathroom, a kitchen, and gardens with fountains and pools for fish. Some villas even had heating under the floors. Inside, the walls were decorated with beautiful pictures called murals.
Keeping clean. Most Romans went to the public baths to wash. Roman baths had hot and cold pools and
Romans washed themselves with...
Aqueduct. To make sure there was enough water for their public baths and fountains, the Romans built pipes called aqueducts. These were often built on top of bridge-like structures. Aqueducts were sloped to keep the water flowing to its destination.
Building work. The Romans were expert builders. They always carefully planned their work, and they had devices such as wooden cranes to lift blocks of stone. Roman builders invented concrete. Some of the roads, bridges and temples they built are still around today. Roman women. Many women got married when they were very young, usually about 14. Most women looked after the house and the family. Some women worked outside the home, as priestesses or running their own businesses. There were even a few women gladiators.
Time travel journal.
My journey to the town life. Roman army. Entertainment. My journey to
Ah, so you've made it back to Imperial China, 700 AD. Arriving by time machine is one way to get around the Great Wall. And here's another.
Silk. Silk cloth was highly valued in ancient times. The
Silk threads are made from...
Writing. The characters used in Chinese writing were invented about 4,000 years ago. In ancient China, only specially trained people such as government officials could read and write. The Chinese were the first people to make paper and the first to print books.
kite. Kite flying was invented in China. Chinese
kites were shaped like...
Family life. Families in China had strict rules. Children had to show respect for their parents and obey their decisions. The head of the household, the grandfather or father, chose who the children married. Children, parents and grandparents often shared the same house.
Chinese dragon. In ancient times, the Chinese believed that dragons...
The ancient Chinese believed that dragons live... The ancient Chinese believed...
Chinese inventions. The Chinese invented many useful things. They were using the...
The Chinese invented the...
The emperor. The most powerful man in China was the emperor. He was the supreme...
The ruler of Imperial China was...
The emperor.
Yes, sirree. Only 4 pieces left to find.
Imperial China. Ancient China. Long ago there were several states in China. A golden age. Between AD 620, Imperial China in AD 700.
Noble's house. Wealthy nobles lived in large, beautiful houses with tiled roofs.
The home of a wealthy Chinese noble.
Terracotta army. The first emperor of China was buried in an amazing tomb.
The terracotta army guarded the...
Farming. Most people in China were farmers. They lived in small villages in the countryside.
In ancient China, most people...
Food. A typical meal for most people in China was rice or noodles with vegetables, and sometimes pork or chicken. Spices might be added to flavour the food.
The most common foods in ancient...
The Great Wall, the longest wall ever built. The Great Wall protected China from raids by warlike tribes. The first emperor forced hundreds of thousands of his people to work building the wall. It was cold, hard work, and thousands of workers died.
Who ordered the Great Wall of China to be built? Shi Huangdi. Who ordered the Great...
Ooh. Ow! Ow!
Chinese medicine. The Chinese developed a way of treating sickness by putting needles into special points on the body. This type of medicine is called acupuncture. Sick patients were also given herbs to help them get better. Chinese medicine is still used by many people today. Chang'an. The capital of Imperial China was called Chang'an. Thick walls and tall watchtowers protected this huge city. Inside the walls were wide streets, parks, the palace of the emperor, and homes for the 1 million people that lived in the city. Animals of China. Deep in the mountains and forests of China were many exotic animals, such as pandas and tigers. However, the most important animals to the Chinese were horses, which came from Asia. Nobles paid high prices for these valuable animals.
Camel caravan. Camel caravans took precious Chinese goods to faraway markets in Europe and the Middle East. Merchants loaded their camels with bundles of silk, paper and porcelain and set off on the long journey west. The route they travelled was called the Silk Road.
Time Travel Journal.
My journey to daily life. The Emperor. Inventions. My journey to medieval Europe.
You've made it to medieval Europe in 1200 AD. I've heard of wandering minstrels, but that's some journey. Join our merrymaking at the village fair.
Muslim civilization. In medieval times, Muslims ruled the southern part of Spain and Portugal. The Muslims built beautiful palaces and gardens with pools and fountains. They were also great scholars. The numbers we use today were brought to Europe by the Muslims.
Mosque. Muslims worship in buildings called mosques. The Muslims who ruled southern Spain in medieval times built many mosques with domed roofs and towers called minarets. Many of their mosques were later turned into churches by Christians. Coat of arms. A coat of arms was a design that a knight wore on his armour, shield and banner when he went into battle. The coat of arms meant that the knight could be recognised on the battlefield even when he was wearing his armour and helmet.
Who would have a coat of arms?
Coat of arms. A coat of...
Make a coat of arms. In medieval times, knights carried their own special coat of arms so they could be recognized. Here you can design your own coat of arms. Drag the pictures you like best onto each of the 4 sections of the shield.
Guilds. In medieval towns, craftsmen and merchants formed organisations called guilds. Each type of work had its own guild. For example, there was one guild for carpenters and another for bakers. Each guild made sure that its goods were of a set standard and price.
Trading ship. In the early medieval period, most merchants travelled only short distances by road to trade things. As time passed, trade began to thrive. Ships carried wine, wool and timber between towns all over Europe. Some ships sailed to the Far East to buy silk and spices.
Crime and punishment. Criminals in medieval Europe were dealt with severely. They were punished in public so everyone could see.
In medieval times,
France. In AD 1200,
Nuns and monks. Medieval nuns gave up all their worldly possessions and
nuns lived in...
nuns and medieval.
Only 3 more pieces?
castle. Kings and nobles built castles where they could live, safe from attack. For protection, some castles were surrounded by a trench filled with water, called a moat. The noble's family and his soldiers and servants lived inside the castle walls.
A castle was where monks lived, kings and nobles.
Make a coat.
Cathedral. The church of a bishop was a grand building called a cathedral.
A cathedral is...
Farmers. Most people in medieval Europe were farmers.
A serf was a medieval farm. A serf was...
Knight. Knights were warriors who fought for their king or lord. In return, the knight was given...
Knights were warriors who fought...
Religion. In medieval times, religion was a huge part of people's lives. Everyone went to church and had to give part of what they owned to the church. People who did not believe in God could be punished. In Western Europe, the Catholic Church was the only Christian church. Medieval Europe, AD 1000 to 1450. The early Middle Ages. After the collapse, land for loyalty. In medieval Europe in AD 1200. Crusaders. In AD 1096, the Pope called on Christians.
Crusaders were Christian knights.
Jousting knights. Knights fought in sporting combats called tournaments to train for real battles. They fought on horseback, armed with long spears called lances. This was known as jousting. The knight who lost had to give his armour and weapons to the winner.
Fairs and festivals. Many towns held fairs once or twice a year. People flocked to the fairs to eat and drink, buy things, and enjoy dancing bears, musicians.
A jester was a
Knights and My journey to the Inca Empire.
Hello again, plucky time traveler. This is the Inca Empire in 1500 AD. The capital city, Cuzco, is built in the shape of a mountain lion. That's what I call town planning.
Inca Road. The Incas built an amazing system of roads around their empire. People traveled.
What animals did the Incas use? What animal?
Inca Road.
Inca transportation. The Incas had to get around without the cars or trains we have today. Choose the way you would get from place to place if you were an Inca by dragging it into the box. Llama, llama.
Rope Bridge. The Andes Mountains are crisscrossed by fast rivers and deep ravines.
Inca bridges were made from
Inca religion. The Incas worshipped many gods. There was a god of the sun, the stars, and the moon. The most important was the sun god. The Incas built many temples to honor the sun god. To avoid the anger of the gods, the Incas gave them offerings.
Rope Bridge.
Eating. Maize was the main food of the Incas. They also ate avocado, tomato, cactus, chili and potato.
the main food of the Inca.
Foods of the Inca. Many of the foods the Inca... Chocolate. Chocolate.
Inca warriors. All Inca men were trained as soldiers and had to go to war whenever they were...
Inca soldiers fought with steel swords. Inca soldiers fought...
Mountain farmers. Most Inca people were farmers who worked the land using wooden tools. Some farmers kept animals such as alpacas to provide milk and wool. Every village had to give a portion of their crops and anything else they produced to the emperor. Weaving cloth. Inca women were experts at weaving wool to make cloth.
Inca women wove clothes.
Inca Empire, AD 1200 to 1532. The Inca people. For thousands. Inca civilization. The Inca Empire in AD 1500. Terraced fields. Many Inca farmers grew their crops on steep mountain slopes.
Terraced fields help to stop
Stone buildings. Inca temples, palaces and city buildings were built from
important Inca buildings were
crafting metal. The Incas were skilled goldsmiths. They melted down gold and silver and shaped it into statues in honor of the sun god. Gold llamas were some of the most popular objects. They also made beautiful gold jewelry with precious stones.
Keeping count. The Incas did not have a writing system. To keep track of things that needed to be counted, they used a bundle of strings called a quipu. Knots were tied in the strings to record information such as how many people lived in the empire. Cusco. Cusco was the capital of the Inca Empire. It was a splendid city, with many temples and palaces built from beautifully worked stone.
Hey, just 2 more pieces left to discover.
The Inca Emperor. The ruler of the Inca Empire was called the Sapa Inca. He was treated like a god because the Incas believed that he was related to the sun god. When an emperor died, his body was preserved as a mummy and kept in a royal palace.
The emperor of the Incas was called the Sapa.
Machu Picchu. The Inca city of Machu Picchu was hidden high in the Andes Mountains. It was a sacred place with many temples and other religious buildings. Most Inca cities were destroyed by the Spanish invaders, but they never found Machu Picchu.
The city of Machu Picchu was a sacred place, the home of the emperor.
My journey to the life expert build Inca people. My journey to the age of industry.
Phew! It's 1850 AD, the age of industry. The factories are booming, the furnaces are blasting, and my back is breaking. Oh well, back to work.
The Industrial Age, AD 1760 to 1900. The Industrial Age, the age of machine, making goods. New machines meant goods. Steamship. Iron steamships were larger and faster than...
Most steamships were made of iron.
Canal boat. In the industrial age, the roads were bad, so the easiest way to move goods around was by boat. Many new canals were dug for barges and narrow boats to carry iron and coal between...
Canal boats were mostly used to carry...
Canal boat. In the industrial age, the roads were bad, so the... Factory. Goods could be made quickly and cheaply in factories, but working in a factory was hard.
In the 1850s,
Iron bridge. In the 1700s, new methods of making iron in large amounts were invented. Iron then became the main building material of the industrial age. It was strong and long-lasting, perfect for bridges, railways, ships and machines.
the industrial age was the first time bridges were...
Hospital. There were very few hospitals in the early 1800s. Those that existed were dirty and germs spread easily.
In the early 1800s, there were...
Hospital.
Only one more to go, Dynamo.
School. In the 1800s, schools became more common, although many children could not go to school because they had to work. Pupils practiced their spelling on slates and memorised passages from the Bible. Sometimes children who made mistakes were hit with a ruler.
Factory workers' homes. In poor parts of town, small houses were built close together.
In the 1850s, most homes... In the 1850s...
Steam train. The first trains began running in the 1820s and soon became very...
In the 1850s, trains...
Life of luxury. Many factory owners became very rich in the industry.
Everyone in the 1850s was poor. False. True.
New farming machines. During the industrial age, new inventions made farming easier.
New farming machines made farming...
Factory. Goods could be...
Country life. At the start of the industrial age, most people lived in the countryside. They farmed the land and lived in small villages. During the 1800s, changes in farming methods forced many people to leave the countryside and find work in towns.
mine. The machines of the industrial age needed coal for fuel. Miners dug out the coal at coal mines. In the early 1800s, so much coal was needed that men, women, and even children worked in the mines. They worked long hours and accidents were common.
Time Travel Journal.
My journey, life, transport, work. Chimney sweep. Many poor children had to work to earn a living. One of the worst jobs was sweeping.
Chimneys were often cleaned out.
My journey to a night.
Welcome to the modern world, traveler.
It's the 1920s.
And there's new inventions aplenty. Whoa! Watch out for low-flying airships. Woo!
Cars. The first cars were invented in the 1880s. Early cars were very expensive and not very fast. Henry Ford's Model T was the first car that was cheap enough for many people to afford. In 1925, a Model T cost $290. Millions were sold worldwide.
The most popular car of the 1920s.
Newspapers. Newspapers in the 1920s contained up-to-date stories from around the world. In the past, many stories came out long after the events had happened. In the 1920s, newspapers were widely available, so everyone could read the latest news.
Picture Palace. In the 1920s, going to the cinema was a favourite.
In the 1920s,
Shopping. There were no supermarkets in the 1920s. People bought their food from local butchers, bakers and greengrocers. Some foods were imported from far away, bringing a greater choice of things to eat.
Telephone. By the 1920s, many people had telephones, which had been invented.
telephones were first invented in... Telephone.
Working women. In the past, there had been few jobs out.
By the 1920s, many women had won...
Electricity at home. Electricity in the home improved the lives of many people.
In the 1920s, electricity...
Radio. In the 1920s, radio stations broadcast programs into...
In the 1920s, people in...
Modern inventions. Some of the things that are important to us today were only computer.
Bathroom. By the early 1900s, many people living in cities had running water in their homes. They had flushing toilets and could run baths with hot water straight from the tap. In the past, people had to get water from wells or from pumps on the street.
Modern clothes. Clothes in the 1920s were a sign of changing lifestyles.
In the 1920s, clothes were more formal than before. In the 1920s,
Airship. In the 1920s, the most fashionable way to travel long distances was by airship.
travelling by airship. Travelling by airship.
Airship. In the 1920s,
Late 1920s city. Changing lifestyles. In Europe and the United States, making life easier. The inventions of the 20th century made Aeroplane. Flying in the 1920s was very different than it is today.
Early aeroplanes could
Skyscraper. Very tall buildings called skyscrapers began to be built in cities.
skyscrapers began to be built.
Time Travel Journal.
My journey. Making life easier. City life. Making the world smaller. Modern clothes.
How about that for talent? You found the professor.
This certificate is to thank you for rescuing me. Yes, you are now a history explorer.
History Explorer Certificate. This is to certify that Kristen completed the time trial, the time trail and rescued the professor, and is now a history explorer. Well, I hope you guys enjoyed this adventure through time with me. I've always loved history games like this. This and Where in Time is Carmen Sandiego are some of my top favorites. So I hope you learned a lot. Be sure to give this video a thumbs up. Leave a comment down below. Which era did you enjoy visiting with me? And of course, subscribe for more nostalgic gaming. Don't forget the playlist in the description box to see all the other DK games on this channel. Remember, you are special and loved. You are never alone, and you're always welcome to come back and hang out anytime. Until the next video, God bless. I'll see you all later. Bye-bye, everyone.
I must say my goodbyes now and carry on with my travels through history. You know, there's so much to discover. Make yourself at home in my attic, and thanks again.
What-ho! A gutsy performance from the young explorer. Now that you've won the professor's freedom, perhaps you'd like to accept another challenge?
Would you like to play again?